acknowledging this meeting is taking place on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Tamtamachtan, or Belcara, is home to an ancestral village of the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We are thankful to conduct our work within their territory. So I'd like to call to order the regular council meeting of June 22nd, 2020. Before we get started, a reminder that this is still a relatively new platform and not everybody is used to it for these council meetings. So I'll remind everybody, at the end of each report, I will request council input first, and council will be putting their hands up just the same as residents will. And so following council input, I'll ask for resident questions. And so residents, if you move your cursor, you will see a participant tab on the bottom of your screen, hopefully come up. If it's on the top of your screen, don't sue me. But if you click on that participant tab, you'll notice a window opens up, and on the bottom of that window, there is a raise hand button. That is how you raise your hand, and it automatically puts you into line to speak. So we will go in the order, council first, residents second for the questions. And we've talked about this before, but if any council has to declare a conflict, we have a waiting room. I can put you in the waiting room, just declare the conflict, and I'll bring you right back out as soon as the topic's moved on. So it's nice and simple for technology. All right. So let's start with the approval of the agenda. Can I get someone to move the agenda, please?
Moved.
I think it was moved by Bruce and seconded by Rob. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carried. Thank you. And the adoption of the minutes. Can I get someone to move the item?
So moved.
Moved by Lisa,
Second.
seconded by Carolina.
Thank you.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carried. We have no delegations, so let's jump right into 5.1, please. Lorna, can you outline the report?
Yes, Your Worship. This is the
Sorry,
land
Carolina, you got your hand up?
Yes. So hang on. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
So I have declared conflict on the one lot number 17 at Whiskey Cove, and ever since have stepped away from the conversation about road ends. I will do so again tonight. Okay, I've been advised by my lawyer all the way, but I do want to make something clear. My conflict, like I can still speak on how the funds will be used from the road ends, but I will have nothing to do on the selection or any conversations that will be prior to. And I want to make it clear that it's my belief that I've done everything in my power to stay out of conflict. I believe I have succeeded so far, and I will keep on doing that. So please put me in the weight room, and good luck, everybody. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll bring it back right when we finish.
Thank you.
Bruce, got your hand up?
Yeah, I'm in exactly the same boat. I have having thought very carefully about it, I'm in the same boat. I did just want to ask that one point be considered by council, and then I'll withdraw and ask to be put into the waiting room. And further to Carolina's point, that is a question really for staff as to whether we need Metro Vancouver's approval regional context statement change if we make modifications to our OCP and our zoning bylaw. And with that, Neil, I'll wait until you're ready to bring me back in.
Thanks. Totally reasonable question, Bruce. We'll keep you up to date.
Thank you.
Sorry for the interruption, Lorna. Please go ahead.
Well, that's fine, Your Worship. Yes, as I was saying, this is an interim report. I think everyone should keep that in mind. There is a lot of information here in regard to the land disposition. In November 2019, the Revenue Generation Committee brought forward a report to Council to explore 7 surplus properties or road ends located in the village, and Council directed staff to have the road ends surveyed and appraised. With the help of our planning consultants, this report has been prepared, and as I said, there's a significant amount of information and significant process to follow yet as we move forward. Dan Watson is on this call, who is one of the co-authors of the report. And so I would ask Dan if he would like to speak to the report.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, sure, I can speak to the report. I'll keep my comments relatively brief, but as Lorna mentioned, it's an interim report to council. Just to give you an update, we've completed surveys for the 7 road ends that were suggested by the Revenue Generation Committee, and preliminary appraisal has been done for for those properties as well. And you'll see the sort of key numbers from the appraisal in this report that you have before you. And we're planning to come back to council with some updates, draft policy, and the full appraisal report at a subsequent meeting. We're targeting July for that. The key recommendations in the report that we're looking for council direction on right now is on that question of the minimum lot size in the village. So as has been identified, the minimum lot size in the zoning bylaw and OCP is 1/2 acre. We looked into the regional context statement, and the overall density in the village is much lower than 0.5 acres per property. There's an average of 1 unit per 2.5 acres in the village. So we think in terms of the regional context statement, we should be okay. But one of the next steps will be to refer this report to the village's legal counsel so we can get clarification on that. But in terms of the overall density of the village, it wouldn't push the village beyond what's been identified in the regional context statement. So we shouldn't need to go to Metro Vancouver for that. But it will, at this point, we're asking for council direction on the question of amending the zoning bylaw and OCP specific to these road end sites to enable them to be developed, because as I mentioned, all of them are less than 1/2 acre. So if they aren't, if an amendment is not brought forward to the zoning bylaw to enable them to be developed, then they won't be able to achieve their full value, because it's unlikely somebody would purchase the property if they can't build on it, or the village would actually face challenges even in drawing up title to the land if they didn't bring it into alignment with regulation. So that's one area where we're looking for direction from council at this point. And then the other things that I'll just highlight quickly, that the report, some of the considerations identified in the report are, there's a bit of discussion about encroachments in here. Most of the properties, except I believe for one, have some sort of what would become an encroachment. Right now, they're not encroachments because they're not parcels, but there are driveways that run through some of the properties, other paved areas, fences, that sort of thing. And so it'll be a consideration for council in terms of whether council wants to invest in moving any of those encroachments off the lands, or if they want to absorb that into the sale price. And when we have a full appraisal report, we'll ask Garnet Wilson, our appraisers, to comment on how they think some of those encroachments might impact the saleability of the lands. The other item, another one of the key items to highlight is that we will be coming back to council to seek direction on is how council wants to approach properties that immediately neighbor the road ends, whether council wants to consider offering a right of first refusal to, for example, rather than sell a road end to a third party, split the road end in half and sell each half to the neighbors who are already on each side. So that's the process for how that would be done in a fair and transparent way is something that we'll be seeking council direction on, and that process could also impact the saleability of the land, and so there'll be some considerations related to that. And then the last one that I'll highlight is that the restrictions under the community charter for waterfront lots. The community charter identifies that the proceeds from the sale of waterfront lots has to be used to improve or purchase access to that same body of water. So we will seek legal comment on that as we continue to, make sure that any policy brought forward receives legal comment on how that'll be done. But it will be consideration for council if the funds are restricted in terms of prioritizing which parcels council might choose to dispose. So in terms of next steps, we'll prepare a draft land disposition policy for council to review at a subsequent meeting, refer this report to legal and financial consultants, investigate some questions that were brought up around fire code separation if new parcels are created. And then pending council direction, we'll come back to council with draft OCP and zoning bylaw updates. And then with that, a recommendation for road ends for disposition, and then can proceed with disposition, again, pending council direction. Thank you. So I can take any questions or through Lorna. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Can I start off with a move for receipt, please?
Move to receive.
Thanks, Rob. We're just waiting on Lisa.
I will second that.
All right, thank you very much. All right, start off with discussion from council, please. Comments, questions? Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Dan, for the report, and Lorna. So I've got a number of questions here, a number of comments. I'll try and do them in the order here. One of my biggest things that jumped out at me is on page 4, under the waterfront lot restrictions. In the second paragraph, it says, subject to legal opinion, one option would be for council to consider using the funds to support efforts to connect Fair Cove North, providing improved public access to water. The first paragraph also refers to if we're selling a waterfront, we have to replace it with a waterfront access to the same body of water. Can we get a definition of what the same body of water is? So if you sell something in Belcarra Bay, does it not have to get replaced in Belcarra Bay? Or can you go all the way anywhere in Pacific Northwest?
Lorna, would you like me to take this one? Or
Sure, please, Dan.
yeah, through your worship. It's a good question, and one of the reasons why we'll want to refer this for legal review. We did connect with Lions Bay, who has disposed of some waterfront properties, and I believe that the approach that they took was it's the larger body of water was all the same body of water, and so if we're thinking of Burrard Inlet as a body of water, that may be one interpretation. It's an idea. The village has identified in its OCP that road access to Fair Cove North is an objective of the village. So it's one potential avenue that could address some of those considerations identified by the village. But at this point, I would recommend that legal opinion on what constitutes the same body of water will be required. Yes.
Okay. And I'm not sure where the Fair Cove North came into this. I think you just explained that. So this didn't come from anyone on council or our CAO. This came from the planner's idea. This was a suggestion in here in this report is coming from your office?
Yes, yes. It came from, the idea comes from the official community plan, which identifies a road to Fair Cove North as an objective of the village. And so as a consideration of the fact that the sale of waterfront land has to be used to fund access to waterfront property, that's one option that council could consider in terms of achieving OCP objectives while meeting those requirements of the community charter.
Well, I appreciate that. The first thing that would have to be done is you would have to have approval from, I believe, Metro Vancouver Parks, Port Moody, First Nations, BC Hydro, and all of that should be done, even though if it's feasible. And we would have to, that road doesn't go to water. It's above St. Clair. It goes into an existing upper Fair Cove property, and then we would have to buy all these Fair Cove properties to get down to the water.
Yeah, I would just say we're aware of all the steps that would need to be followed for many of these suggestions.
Yeah,
and like I said, this is just an interim report, and there are many actions that need to be taken for follow-up.
Right. And one other comment, it doesn't have to be commented back on, the understanding from the sale of the road ends, when we first started talking about this 1.5 years or so ago, it was to generate money to pay down our capital projects and our water debt. And I don't see how buying property in Fair Cove to transfer one waterfront property to another is going to deal with that. And I also, under the next steps, I also was questioning the regional context statement. Where does that fall in next steps here? Should it be done first? Does it fall after a draft OCP? I think that it should be in the next step somewhere.
Your worship, I believe that is in the review of the OCP, that part and parcel with what you do when you review the OCP.
Okay, so that includes the RCS.
Right.
Regional context statement. Thank you, that answers all my questions at the moment.
Thanks. Rob, any comments before we go to residents?
Yeah, just a comment is on, has anybody looked at the fact where a body of water, a small body of water, has multiple accesses?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. Dan, do you?
Well, the properties that we're talking about in a lot of locations, there are multiple accesses to the same body of water. Has there been any questions, Dan, put out there when that is the situation? It's not like we're taking away an access to a body of water where we would be looking at lowering the number of accesses to the same body of water.
Yeah, my understanding is that the funds generated from it would still be required to be invested in creating or improving access. So in other jurisdictions where they've sold waterfront property, they've improved the access to on another one of those points that connects to the same body of water. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, one approach that would be permitted would be to take the revenue from the sale of one property and create a park and improve steps or access at another one of those properties that provides access to that body of water.
So my next question would be is it possible then to leave access to the body of water? Say we've got a 66-foot road allowance, that we slice off 50 feet and we keep 16 feet for the access?
That is a question that would go to legal counsel, Your Worship.
So we haven't asked that question at this point in time?
No, we have not.
Okay,
Is that it, Rob?
that's all I've got at this point.
Yeah, I'll just offer a quick comment. I'm in line with Lisa that I was really surprised by the potential of the allocation of any funds from a sale of a road end being allocated towards the north-south connector. That wasn't the initial intent, as I think the Revenue Generation Committee looked at this, and I'd like to get a lot more engagement before considering selling a road end for that purpose, because that is not the original intent. I think we have to respect that wasn't, despite the fact it's been brought up in this meeting.
And that's fine, Your Worship. That could be removed. Absolutely.
Yeah. As I said, I just think we need to talk about it more, but I'm with Lisa. Rob, you put your hand up again. Is something else you want to talk about this before we go to residents?
Just one other question for clarification. It's been mentioned previously that Lions Bay sold that waterfront lot and didn't use the funds. Or they used the funds in a different manner. Is that correct?
I confirmed with Lions Bay, and Dan, you may want to speak to this too, that they followed the community charter as it states for the sale of waterfront property.
So they did not use the funds for putting in a water tower, et cetera, et cetera?
Dan, do you have
Through
any?
Your Worship, my understanding is that they used it to improve the condition of another piece of access to the waterfront. I'm not sure exactly what the capital investment was, but for example, they may have built a new set of stairs or a new park at one of the waterfront.
Let's not guess, Dan.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's not guess, please.
No, but
Yeah.
we're really beyond, we're just one little tiny part of this report, Your Worship. And
I agree. This is for perspective. There obviously is a long way to go. Appreciate the interim report and the work that's gone into this. I'm going to open it up to residents for some questions or comments as well. Dave Goodman, you're up first, please. Dave? Check one. Bueller? 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 Dave, we can come back to you, Dave, if you need some more time. Okay, I'm gonna put Dave's hand back. I can't put his hand back up. Dave, just put your hand back up, and when you figure out your volume, we can bring you back on. We'll move next to. Oh, did you get your volume to work, Dave?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Please go ahead.
My apologies for that. And thank you, Mayor, for your comments. I think they were insightful and consistent with what I've been trying to say for quite a while now. I disagree with our administrator, our chief administrator officer, that this is only a small part. It seems to me that it's a major part, is the disposition of waterfront lots. That was going to be the major revenue generator. Now that we know that, or it seems most likely that it's not going to be generating funds for capital projects, that this should be a dead issue. Why are we continuing to pursue and spend money on that when, in all likelihood, the opinion's already stated that it's got to go back to other lands? So it's not going to be available to use for fire prevention. So I just wonder why council wants to continue to pursue it.
Well, Dave, we've talked about this lots before. The lawyers have said that it can be done. You see continued consideration about ensuring that we're on side with everything legally, and until we're certain that it can't be done, all road ends are being considered in order to help offset the costs of the required infrastructure improvement for the water supply for firefighting. All right, I hope that helps. And next up, we have Ben Shulistani. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you, Mayor Belenki. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would be in favor of this motion that the village proposes, but I take two issues with it. Number one, I think it would be unfair treatment if we allow only the road ends to subdivide instead of allowing all the residences and all the owners subdivide their property. So that's my number one issue. And especially I take issue with it because our former mayor subdivided his property into 3 lots, lot 11, lot 12, and lot 13, and he kept lot 11 only.
You had us with the first point without all the subsequent detail. We got the first point. Did you have a second question, or would you like us to address one first?
Thank you, Mayor Belenki. I just wanted to know, I also wanted to say the relevance, because it's unfair to allow an official or a former official to subdivide their property to a lot which is less than half an acre, which is lot 11.
Ben, this is not appropriate. I told you that already. So
I'm not sure why.
Ben, the detail is not appropriate for the question.
Fair enough. I'll go to the next. I'll discuss the next issue. The next issue, issue I see with this motion is that if we allow the right of first refusal, which Dan Watson proposed, I think again that would be an unfair treatment, because we already know that the right of first refusal was not observed in allowing dock associations, namely Druze Wharfage Association, to build a dock on the foreshore.
Ben, we don't need the background. I've asked you once already. We don't need the background. You can make your point without trying to use examples. Okay.
If the residents need to know the background, why I take issues, I would be happy to tell everyone. So I take two issues with this to clarify. Issue number one is that I believe everybody, all the residents, all the owners should be able to subdivide their property similar to the road ends. That's number one. Number two is that I think this right of first refusal will be an unfair treatment because it was not observed in other aspects of the village.
Okay, thanks for your point. So there's a very clear reason why we're looking at the 0.5 just for village property, because it's a much more significant process to review an OCP affecting every property in the village. And so that is going to be part of the consideration when we do a formal review of the full OCP as per the recommendations of the Revenue Committee. But this is what would be looked at as an amendment just to enable some of the road ends, whether water access or otherwise, that are under half an acre to be available for sale down the road if that is determined to be the direction that everybody chooses to go. With regards to the second piece and the right of first refusal, or what I sometimes refer to, I'm thinking of as a ROFR, the right of first refusal does not have to degrade the value of the property if it goes to open market and we allow residents to match. There are multiple ways it could be done, including the splitting of the properties. And we will engage that because we're going to try to treat residents with respect, especially the neighbors of any potentially affected parcels. Okay, so that is how that will go.
So to clarify, so I guess that would be, I think that would be discriminatory given that this right.
No, Ben, this is the opposite of discrimination. We're giving everybody a chance to have a fair shot at the land, and the neighbors having a right of first refusal is no different than two people having the exact same bid and us choosing a neighbor, a resident or a neighboring property to be the party that we would choose to accept the offer from. So it is, if anything, it supports Belcarra residents and the neighboring affected parcels.
I'm not disagreeing.
Ben, I'm moving on, okay?
Desmond, I have issued that comment. Just wanted to clarify.
Ben, I'm not going to ask you again. Your turn is done, and I'm going to move to Desmond next. Desmond, go ahead, please.
Mic's off.
Desmond, can you click mute?
There we go. I was going to say this may not be appropriate given what the mayor just said, but I was going to ask Dan if his committee had, we're going to apply this reduction in minimum lot size across the village or just to road ends?
This is, the proposal is just for the road ends and under consideration of this report.
Okay, thank you.
And it could be extrapolated, I suppose, that it could be for any village property, but not to affect existing resident parcels. Lauren, is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Thank you. Thanks, Desmond. Don Babineau next, please go ahead.
Hi. And I apologize if this has already been answered. The 0.5 acre, that's currently in our OCP, or is that in our new zoning bylaw?
That's in the existing OCP.
In the existing OCP. And so if we want to proceed, how do you proceed? Because all these lots was stated would be less than 0.5. So without a new OCP, or do you require a new OCP to be amended to allow these smaller than 0.5 acre lots to be sold?
No, because this is a small group of properties and they're owned specifically by the village as opposed to residents across the village, this would be considered only an amendment. It doesn't require a full OCP review in order to do a small change like this.
Ah, I see. Okay, very good. The second question I've got is just trying to understand this improvement issue. So just as an example, if we were to sell a road end for an oceanfront road end for $2 million, and it was stated in the report that you could improve another access, put some stairs in and whatnot. You don't have to invest an equal amount to improve that access, or like again, if you sell it for $2 million, do you have to improve something somewhere else for $2 million, or could you spend $140,000 and put some nice new stairs into a water access somewhere?
It's a good
Your
question.
Worship.
Sorry, go ahead, Lorna.
Oh, Dan, did you have an answer for that?
Through Your Worship, I would say that my understanding is that the full sum of money generated from the property has to be used for improving or creating access to the same body of water. Though what I'm hearing from this meeting and the next step will be a legal review of this to get a really full understanding of what opportunities we have and don't have for the use of these funds.
Exactly.
Okay. And this, again, just so I can understand, this requirement to improve an access somewhere else, is that a provincial law? Is that our OCP? Where is that written?
Yes, and community charter is a provincial statute.
Provincial statute. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. John, you're next. I'll remind you that we're going to move on to a new question. Please don't review some of the things we've already answered.
Thank you, Mayor Belenki. If you wish, I can wait for David Goodman to go for the second time, and then I ask my question.
All right. David Goodman, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure that council is aware, then given what has transpired with respect to disposition of funds, that the recommendation, the first paragraph of the interim report, I think it would be unwise to accept that recommendation wholesale without getting first the legal opinion and then determining which lots can be pursued. So I just urge you to proceed with caution with respect to accepting that recommendation as it is currently stated.
So building on what Dave just asked Lorna, perhaps you can comment. We already have a legal opinion stating this is possible. The fact that it's being brought up again that legal opinions will continue to be sought, is that can you provide some guidance as to why the current one that we have is not may not be sufficient for what we're planning?
Well, Your Worship, they would be specific to particular lots and what the council may view that they want to proceed with.
Okay, so we've been given the umbrella go ahead, and then any future investments can be specific to the opportunities allocated at that lot. And that may build
Exactly.
on Councillor Beg's comment that if we decide to use a smaller piece of the entire lot's property and to leave a access point, that would be, for example, part of, I would assume, the legal opinion as to whether that satisfies certain requirements, correct?
That's correct. And Your Worship, and Dan may want to speak to this also, the recommendation is for us to move forward to bring back information to council. For example, on July 6th, we would like to bring back to council a draft land disposition policy for council review. So as you'll see on at the end of the report, the next steps, there are several next steps, and we would like to move them along as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Dave, did you have a follow-up comment?
I did. Just based on what you said, the legal report that I saw the summary of, which I've asked for the full report and have not had access to yet, was simply restating what it was in the charter, that you can't use those funds other than to buy property. So do you have a different legal opinion that you were just referring to now? You seem to have made the comment that you already have a legal opinion that you can go ahead with this.
Lorna?
No, I didn't say that, Your Worship. I'm just saying that we will obtain legal opinions as required.
No, I think the mayor said that.
No, we have a legal opinion saying that water lots can be disposed of. Correct. That's the same summary that I've seen as what you've seen.
Thank you.
All right, John Chulstani.
Thank you. My first question, which is a new one, the comment that Your Worship made about my first question did not apply to the second question of the same person on the same topic.
I'm sorry, I'm not clear. What's your question?
Your Worship directed me to move on or not ask a question until wait for others to ask their second question. That was your intent?
I was asking you not to include another question already answered. So the question about the right of first refusal and the question about the OCP amendment versus a full OCP review for the 0.5 acre minimum parcel size. So we've covered both those, and feel free to ask another one.
Certainly, I haven't asked my question yet. I wondered if if the comment made to me is not, is the same comment going to be made for everybody, or is it just me?
John, are you asking if you were the only one who's being asked not to ask the same question over and over and over again?
Yes, that is my question.
Yeah, you are so far the only one I've had to ask who has repeated the same question over and over again.
This is my first question. I haven't asked any question.
John, this isn't a debate. Do you have a question you'd like to ask now?
Sure, thank you. I move on. So my question is, do you agree that not providing the first right of refusal to a property that is going to be affected is being disrespectful to that property?
I already addressed this, and I consider it a gesture of respect to consider offering it at least as a right of first refusal to the neighboring properties. I have already answered that question.
Thank you. And I wondered if that right of refusal, that right of first refusal, is actually part of a bylaw and is not being recognized. Is that going to be a disrespectful to the owner, or is it just not, or is it actually a violation of the bylaw?
There is no bylaw. We are discussing this right now. It is the first time we've ever had this discussion. So it is as far away from a bylaw being confirmed as it can possibly be and still being discussed.
Thank you.
All right, I'll move on. And Don Babineau.
Hi. Hi again. Thank you. Okay, so we have, it was narrowed down to 7 road ends, of which 7, that was then further reduced to 3 road ends for study. I think all 7 were surveyed. But of the 3 road ends that we're looking at more seriously, do any of those 3 road ends, and I'm not sure which ones they are, do any of those 3 road ends require further legal opinion beyond what you have already?
So we have not selected the 3. The reason you've seen that the surveys and the appraisals of this are of 7 is in order to start the discussion around which of the 7 would we focus on to become the 3 that we would consider actually investing in disposition of. And so we would certainly have to do more work once those 3 lots are determined to be the ones we're going to look to dispose of if that gets that far.
Okay, so of the 7, do we require any further legal opinion on any of those 7 beyond the legal opinion we already have?
Lorna, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding from Lorna's recent comment is that we would have a legal opinion on each one of them just to do a final confirmation of what the initial legal opinion was, which was that it can be disposed of. We'd have a final confirmation in advance of any significant investment. Is that correct, Lorna?
Yes, that is correct. But primarily we're talking about the lots that have access to the water.
Of the 7, how many have access to the water?
Dan, can you answer that?
3, isn't it?
It's 3. Yeah, it's 3.
3, yeah.
So,
4 inland, 3 on the water.
so do all 3 require further legal opinion beyond what we have?
They might as we go further into the process.
Okay, Dan? Don?
Yeah, that might be a good answer. Thank you.
All right. Desmond, go ahead, please.
I was just wondering where I could find the rationale that was used to select the 7 rather than the ones that were left out.
The Revenue Generation Committee's formal report, and you can find it online.
Okay.
It's under, I believe, Mayor's Reports. Is that correct, Lorna, on our website? No, not Mayor's Reports. Sorry, Council's Reports?
Council's reports, yes.
Yeah.
And
So that would explain why some others were not selected.
Correct. The Revenue Committee did a staggering amount of work in a reviewing of all of the road ends and came forward with the 7 that were recommended that Council accepted. And we are where we are because of the Revenue Generation Committee's focus.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. All right. So back to Council. Did we move this? We did
yes,
move.
we've moved receipt, Your Worship. We haven't removed. So we've moved receipt. So if that's adopted, then we have the recommendation in the report.
I'm going to remind everybody, because we've been talking for a long time, what the recommendation is. that staff be directed to pursue implementation of land disposition substantially in accordance with the land disposition report dated June 22nd, 2020, and that staff bring back a report on amending the official community plan and zoning bylaw to permit lot sizes less than 0.5 acres only for village-owned parcels intended for land disposition. So this is, again, just one step forward. Okay?
Right. So if you could vote on the motion to receive and then maybe move that motion.
Okay, so can we get, so we need to move this again, is what you're saying? Move receipt of this motion?
The first motion that you asked council to move is just for receipt of the report.
Understood. So can I get a motion to receive this recommendation?
You have the motion. You just need to call the question, Your Worship. Sorry.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Rob, are you voting? Are you opposed?
No, I'm not opposed. I want to clarify. Well, I guess we can't now.
Well, Rob, we are at the voting portion. So this is a big part of your job as counselor, my friend. So I'll call the question again. All in favor of the recommendation?
We only have the recommendation or not. I'm in favor.
Thank you.
Okay.
Lisa,
It's just to receive the
Just to
report.
receive
Now,
the report.
yeah.
Just to receive the report.
Okay, it's received. All right.
Did,
We've had lots of discussion. So now, Lorna, we get to vote on it again.
Now you need to have a mover and seconder for the recommendation in the report, please.
All right, can I get someone to move it?
And can I just clarify the recommendation again? Is,
It's the one that I read in the agenda.
the option 1, 2, or 3?
No, it's that staff be directed to pursue implementation of land disposition substantially in accordance with the land disposition report.
My apologies. Yeah.
Yeah, that one.
I was on the next page when he read that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
No
Sorry
problem.
about that.
No
Mayor.
problem at all. All right, so shall I call the question?
We need a mover and seconder, please.
Yeah, I'll move. I'll move.
Rob's moving it. Lisa, will you second it?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. All right, this has been the hardest one we've had in this council's entire history. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion carried. So I'm going to bring back our two other councilors.
Oh, one moment. Sorry.
Oh, shoot, I just brought one back. Hang on. We're going to have to kick Bruce out again. Bruce, I'm really sorry. We just had a late hand up that wants to discuss this still. We're getting close. I apologize. Can I send you back?
No, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to send you back. Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
Do we have to, is this an actionable item under the considerations through the chair to Lorna? Where it says the following options are presented to council for consideration, or is that going on the next report in July?
That's going on the next report. As I said, we'll bring back the draft land disposition policy and further report with more detail than this one. Yes.
All right, I thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, I'm bringing them back.
Come back.
Councillor Drake and Councillor Clark. Councillor Clark, thank you much for your patience. Welcome back. A quick update, Bruce. We did address your question, and Dan Watson responded that it would not be necessary, in his opinion, at this point, to have a conversation on the regional piece with Metro Vancouver. Okay. You are muted, Bruce, just so you know.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
I thought he said he was going to get an legal opinion on that.
I misunderstood. I thought Bruce was asking about Metro Vancouver having to be.
Yeah, the regional, yes, the regional report.
The regional context statement.
Right.
What Dan said was that because the village already has lots smaller than 0.5 of an acre, that it wouldn't need to go to Metro Vancouver because it's already within, and it's only for village-owned lots, so it's already within the OCP.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
No problem.
We're all clear.
Yeah, Rob, you want to have your hand up as we?
Yeah, just for clarification, I think Dan also stated in that the density was one house per 2.5 acres in Belcarra, and for that reason would stay within the context of our statement and would not require metros.
And for that, go ahead, Dan. Dan, you've
That's
got,
correct. Yeah, I did indicate that we would be forwarding the report to legal counsel so they can comment on that. But our understanding is that because the village has one house per 2.5 acres on average, that adding a few extra lots wouldn't by any means push the village over the density identified in the regional context statement.
Okay, but they'll check with legal anyway.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Caroline, you have a question?
Yes, just for clarity, because I missed that part of the conversation. What was Bruce's question?
I'm tired of talking.
Sorry,
I can't do it as well as they can for themselves. Bruce, would you please repeat the question?
Sure. It was, well, Lorna, you maybe want to summarize it. You're recording it.
But I've been recording a lot, so.
Let me go. It was to clarify whether we'll require Metro Vancouver approval in terms of regional content statement with any amendments we make to our OCP and or zoning bylaws.
Oh, okay. My understanding on that is that every time you do an amendment with the OCP, it would have to go through the region as well as the neighboring municipalities. Is that correct, Dan? To the chair.
Dan or Lorna?
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, we would, through the chair, we would notify, in most cases, we would notify relevant jurisdictions of changes to the OCP, but it wouldn't require a change to the regional growth strategy, which requires approval by the Metro Vancouver board. We wouldn't need to seek their approval at this point.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. Okay, but they do have to be notified as well as, and more importantly as well, correct?
Yeah, when amending the OCP, yeah, we would typically notify, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So meanwhile, back at the ranch, 5.2, Lorna, regarding the disclosure of legal advice policy 213. Can you outline the report, please?
Yes, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is to provide a policy for council related to this disclosure of legal advice to the public that's been received by council and staff. And the report outlines the comments received from our legal counsel, Guy Patterson, when he attended a council meeting on June the 8th. And so the attached policy is for council's consideration. Under number 4, I've inserted the comment, when a member of staff or council receives legal advice paid for by the municipality. That's specific to that one. And on number 5, the one change is within a timely manner. So the policy's available for council discussion.
Anyone on council? Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate all the efforts that gone into this proposed policy. As I've previously stated, I just simply can't endorse or support a policy to disclose legal advice. It's just against my nature, working in the industry. And you can never know at any time if any piece of advice would become part of litigation in the future. And once our privilege is waived, you can't go back in time. And as I just can't endorse this policy. I don't think we're any more special than any other municipality in the province of British Columbia or in any province of Canada. So, or any other city in the province of British Columbia or Canada. So I just can't endorse, and as our legal counsel has said, you know, this is privilege between client lawyer privilege. So summary is perfect, but disclosing legal advice, I just can't. I'm sorry.
Bruce, you're next.
Thank you, Neil. Well, first, let me see, Lisa, you've got a great deal more experience with law than I have. But I see this seems to me to be balanced. It really, what it calls for is for the council to discuss the possibility of release and the very arguments you've raised can be brought up in that discussion. So I mean, if you're somebody looking to receive copies of legal advice the council's had, there's no guarantee you're going to get them here. There's a guarantee that council will sit down, consider the advice we had from our lawyer, consider the context within which we've received the advice, and we'll do that in a reasonably timely fashion. I think that's about as far as we can go in terms of meeting a commitment for transparency, which I appreciate is something this council's had. So to me, it seems reasonable, but I would caution people not to expect that it's going to mean a great deal more gets released than was released in the past. Thank you.
No worries. Carolina.
Thank you. So, so previously on this, I had some concerns as well. My concerns match Lisa's concerns. Of course, I worry about releasing, about giving up the privilege and confidentiality between client and the lawyer. But there's another thing here too that catches my attention, is that under item number 9, as time permits, following the adoption of this policy, the CEO will provide each council member a summary of all legal advice the village has received since November 5th of 2018. Council will deal with each piece of legal advice received under this section in accordance to this policy. It's a great concern for me because I see that our staff already are overwhelmed. There is a lot on their plate right now. I would prefer to do what the lawyer said, and instead of having a policy, release advice on basis, like on case by case basis. I would prefer to do that. That would save some staff time and it would save the municipality some money, because I believe to summarize every single legal advice that we've got since November of 2018, that would take a lot of time. And it will also, I believe, will take, we would have to pay the lawyers to summarize. And also dealing the fact that I do think it's very dangerous to be releasing advices, because it does put the village in a vulnerable position. That being said, I understand there was one legal advice that's being asked by one resident. To me, I don't see a huge problem, if it's speaking to some policy that council is considering. So it's not that I'm like 100%, no, I won't release any. I think if there's very specific cases that I would be okay to do that. But I don't see a policy being necessary at this point in time. And all that staff time being spent on this, as well as money with lawyers, I don't see that being a good call right now, because we do have other things that we have to worry about, like putting the water committee back to work. So I will not be supporting this tonight, but I do appreciate the effort and the transparency. Thank you.
It's worth clarifying, and Lorna, you've seen more of these things than I have, but I've never received a piece of legal advice that didn't include a summary already, because the legal advice has a summary and then it has the background information supporting the summary. And as a result, there's no additional work, no additional money to review a summary.
Can we confirm this with Lorna, please? Because that's not, I have received legal advice in the past, and it's one thing if I ask for a written legal advice, it's another thing if I ask for the lawyer to make a summary of that legal advice so I can release it to the public. So that is
I believe number 9 states that I would be required to list all the legal advice that has been received.
So we just compile all the reports and review it?
Yes.
Will there be any lawyer fee to summarize those? Will there be any lawyer fee on top of this or not? Or it will just be staff time?
It would be staff time.
Compile, I'm gonna, well, Rob, you haven't commented yet. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, my only comments is I looked at this as a guideline, a policy that's a guideline for council to follow and what they need to consider if we've got a legal opinion. And I mean, there are many areas within this policy that councillors or a group of councillors could very simply negate any information going out. And I can't believe that information would be released if councillors had, and or the mayor had any concerns at that point in time. I look at this as simply a guideline on a roadmap on how you're going to go about if, for instance, a legal advice was requested to be disclosed to a constituent. I mean, that's basically what we're looking at here. That's how I look at this document. And I think it's good to have, if you will, a roadmap on how we're going to proceed to go through. That way, it's very clear. The clarity is there. You're going to follow it. And if you object to it, you're going to object to it. I don't see, this is saying we're going to release everything at that point in time. So that's the only comments I would have at this time. I have no problem with this at all.
Okay, so I haven't gone yet, and Bruce, you've already gone, so I'll just do a quick comment.
Sure.
This is for perspective, a simple policy to review. It's not a policy to release. It's a policy to review. And under number 10, it says, despite the policy, there is no requirement that we'd actually have to disclose anything anyways. This just shows that we're going to review for consideration, releasing summary and or full legal opinions. Waiving privilege is not a scary thing. And if people are afraid of waiving privilege, it's because they've done something wrong. And they're worried about communication going out that can support someone else's case. And if we screw up, we have to own it. So just the consideration of whether or not we want to review and release a summary or a full opinion, I can't imagine this is a scary thing just to have to discuss it. And I'll tell you, I think, for example, under 2B, that legal advice obtained in relation to a counsel conflict of interest, that removes the opportunity for counsel to actually show that a counselor or mayor wasn't in a conflict of interest, which creates more credibility for the village. So I think it's even tighter than it should be. I think we should be required to review, and we can choose in a vote on every single piece. If we're going to review it or not, and if we're going to release it, it can only be a summary or it can be the full policy. So we can consider that. But this is just a policy for review, to Bruce's point. There's no risk whatsoever with talking about this stuff. And to Carolina's point about it being too much work, it's compiling a bunch of emails. We have probably 13 emails with legal advice, maybe 15 or whatever the number is. It's just compiling those emails. It's not a lot of staff work. Let's not make it a scary thing to have to review what residents have paid for in legal opinions. All right, I'm off my shouting box. Bruce, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, look, I appreciate the main thing. I think I agree with Rob primarily. It's more of a policy and a direction. Where it's going to tie up time is when we see in future legal opinions. We're very likely at the time we review them to discuss whether, when, and what form they should be released based on these criteria. As for the others, I mean, if somebody has one they want to press us on, I'd move on it, but I don't see it as something that's going to take staff time away from other items. I guess I would say, in my view, unless we have a specific request, I'd see it as a, as we have time kind of thing to review past cases. I don't think we have any urgent ones sitting, frankly, that won't be fairly clear cut, but I certainly think it's a good policy going forward. So that's what I have to say. Thanks.
Carolina?
Yes, to Neil's point first, I'm not worried about one specific advice being released under 2B or 2A or 2 whatever. That's not what I was talking about. It's more about it as a whole subject, all of the advices. So Lorna, just for clarity for me, and to Bruce's point, I'm sorry, I do think it's a very well-written policy. I must say that. Lorna, how long do you think, if you have an idea, how long do you think it will take to summarize all of them? And once you summarize them, do they have to go to the lawyer before being released or not? Thank you.
I don't know how long it would take, given the other work I have on my desk right now, but I would certainly put it there to be done. And no, it does not have to go to the lawyer.
Okay, not even for the summary. Okay, I was under to understand that did. So I'm sorry, I was wrong about that. Thank you.
All right, we have one hand up. Ben Shulistani, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Belenki. I wanted to, can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
In my opinion, the village represents the residents. So any legal opinion must protect the rights of the residents. So I don't see any legal opinion that would violate the rights of the residents and could have a potential for a lawsuit unless that lawyer is protecting himself for providing an opinion that might be against the rights of the residents of the village. So the disclosure, I believe, would give an opportunity to the residents to discuss potential issues with that opinion and discuss those issues before such an opinion becomes a bylaw in the village.
Thanks. Good point. I will remind everybody though that that's not what this bylaw is about. This policy would only be about us having to review them. We would not actually have to release them as a result. Carolina, you have your hand up again?
Thank you. So I just want to point out something out too. I'm originally, I guess most know, I'm originally from Brazil. And when I came to Canada, I find that all of the laws here are written in a way that makes it very transparent for everybody. So I guess that's one of the things too that I don't see a need to go above and beyond that, and do something that other municipalities, at least to my knowledge, haven't done it. And obviously, I am also following the lawyer's advice on that, and I am being extra cautious. So I came with my mind open, to see if anybody would change my mind. I will say again, it's a very, very well written policy, and I do understand, Neil, that is always up to council. I always understood that. It was very clear on the policy. So yeah, those are my comments for now. Thank you.
All right, Lorna, did we move this?
No, you did not, Your Worship.
Can I get someone to move the? I'm not even going to bother just jump into it.
Neil.
Okay, Rob moved it.
I'll second.
Bruce second. Thank you very much. That seems to be all the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, motion carries. Reports from mayor and council committee representatives. So this was an idea that's come up from a few residents, and we're going to try and touch on just the major projects happening in the village so everybody's up to speed. 6.1. And Lorna, do you want me to go through these? You've got these under reports from mayor. So shall I go through these, or would you like to take the lead and I can add if you need me to add anything?
It's up to you, Your Worship. If you'd like to go ahead.
All right, I'll go, and please don't hesitate to add things in if I miss anything. So the official community plan full review, we've alluded to it tonight already. It is being held up primarily because we cannot hold an election during COVID. It hasn't been figured out by any jurisdiction, I believe, how to manage an election during COVID. So when we can have a gathering of people more than 50 people, AKA an election in Belcarra, we will form the committee that will begin the process of the full OCP review. So that is, we are waiting for the ability to have a larger gathering than 50 people to allow for the election to happen. On 6.2, the OCP review regarding section 3.2, the highway encroachment area, that is the amendment, and that is, as communicated before, a prioritized project for council and staff because of the timeliness of the moratorium being lifted for the port. So I believe we're going to hope for a project report, Lorna, at the next council meeting, correct?
Yes, Your Worship, and at the second meeting in July, we should have a bylaw amendment for council review.
I can speak on behalf of staff and how much work this has been, because I've been having just a couple of the conversations with the port, understanding the amount of information and process being figured out on the spot, as opposed to even having a chance to plan this in advance of the moratorium being lifted. So the second meeting in July is when we can expect the actual bylaw proposal, and we'll have a progress report coming up at the next council meeting.
Yes, hopefully, Your Worship. I'm working with the planner on that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. 6.3, the Revenue Generation Committee follow-up. I don't believe this is actually, there's anything action focused on this Revenue Generation Committee right now. Correct, Lorna?
No, that's what we're actually working on, is their interim report, Your Worship, with the road.
Okay. So the road ends is, okay. So this is being captured under the road ends bucket, or the bucket of Revenue Generation Committee is where road ends are being discussed. So everybody's very up to speed on that.
Yes.
And the 6.4 water system for firefighting capacity review. The fire underwriter survey is working with our engineer and the fire chief and staff in the form of their audit currently. And I don't have any idea when we might receive any feedback from them. Lorna, any thoughts?
No, I haven't. The forms from the FUS have been sent out for completion. by the engineer and the fire chief. I do recognize that certain businesses are working under COVID restrictions, but they are still working. Sometimes it's just taking a little bit longer to hear back.
Okay, thanks. And I'm going to add in one last one, which I can't provide much of an update, but I think it should be on the radar just because it's a big thing for the village. Lorna, of the transition to the no parking or permanent parking only signs, how much of the village has already finished its transition?
Well, I drove around today with Public Works and looked at some of the signage. They've ordered new signs because they needed more than they had in stock. So that's ongoing. And I think probably half the village has been completed, maybe just over half. We've had very good response from residents with regard to, you know, picking up their decals and getting their visitor parking passes. We're continuing to support residents in that manner and trying to encourage non-residents not just to drive in and park, because you've had a big hand in the change in the sign too at the entrance. But it continues to be a bit of a challenge on a nice day, I must admit, but we're making progress, I think.
Okay, thanks. So seeing as this is the first time we've had that update list, I'm happy to go to the questions, but if there's a better way we can do this also, please let me know. But we're doing our best to try to make sure that everybody's up to date on all the different major projects. Bruce, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. I just wanted to say when it comes to the water system, I'll be speaking to that when we get down to our information items around letters, because the report from the water committee, one. And secondly, I think it's a good idea having this in there, so I appreciate the addition. I wasn't sure what it was when I first saw it, but I like the concept. And third, I wanted to say, now my exposure would be limited. I'm very interested to hear from others that were in the audience as to their experience, but it seems to me that the signage has had quite an impact from what I have seen in terms of the number of cars parked.
It definitely has an impact.
All right, so we will get some feedback from residents on that as well. Lisa, you're up next.
Unmute. Thank you. My question regarding the signs, why do we have signs that say, big signs that say resident only parking when we're really clear that they should just say permit parking only?
Well, because I think that's for the public driving into the village. They need to understand that. You know, we do, the other signs say parking only with permit, but when you come into the village, they need to understand that. We're trying to get to turn around and not come into the village.
Lorna mentioned a story early to me that I hadn't considered. I think we talked about this a week or two ago, just on one of our regular updates, Lorna. The English as a second language visitors apparently thought permit only meant it was permitted to park in Belcarra. And so I hadn't ever had that cross my mind. And when she explained that to me, I thought, okay, I can kind of see why we're leaning that way. But I was also surprised, Lisa, when based on the conversation, but I can get it now for that sign in particular.
Thank you for that.
Carolina.
Thank you. Yeah, so to Neil's point, yes, that is, I've met a couple of people trying to park in front of Wilm's place. That they understood that it was permitted because there is a green circle with a permit parking thing on it. So it does make it more clear. The other thing I would like to bring it up, I heard from residents, and there is that big sign from Parks at the entrance of the village that says not local, please turn around. I have a bit of a problem myself with that sign. I know there's some people that has problems with that as well. You know, in the end, the roads are public, even though we are not allowing anybody to park on our roadways right now, which I obviously agreed with because I agreed with the motion. But I find that the writing in there should be something that's less aggressive. Not local, please turn around. I don't find that very nice, so I don't really know where that came from. You know, if Parks just decided to do that on their own. But I would rather see it if council agrees to have Lorna reach out to Parks and put something like local traffic only, no park access, violators will be towed and ticketed, and put the fine. I would put the dollar amount of the fine so people understand it's not a $50 fine anymore. It is $100 or $200 fine. So instead, I would like to see that type of wording on the sign. So if council agrees with me, I feel really strong about it. I heard from other people in the community that found that that sign was a bit rude. So yeah, I would like to see what the rest of council thinks about it. Thank you.
Rob, you're up. Rob, you're muted. Rob, you're muted. You're laughing at something funny, but we can't hear.
Yeah, I'm laughing and I'm muted. My input, Caroline, on it is when I drove back tonight, and the temporary parking signs were all moved down to the corner by Sassamat where they walk out onto the walkway across, and there was 5 or 6 cars parked there. When you're dealing with those kind of people that abuse, the intent of what's going on, then I have absolutely no problem with the sign that we now have saying turn around, because where they've got that sign, they've also moved the temporary no parking signs back to allow the traffic to be able to turn at that point. And I actually saw 2 people turn at that point because there was room, and obviously nothing coming the other way. But when you're dealing with those kind of belligerent individuals, you've got to be pretty forceful. Being nice about it at this point in time, I think, won't do the job. Those are just my feelings.
Thank you, Rob. If I could speak back to that, Neil, please. Thank you. Yes, I don't think that the wording, it might be more aggressive and make people turn around right away. But I don't think the wording on the sign will prevent people from taking the Port Moody signs and throwing it at the ditch. So, but I appreciate your feedback, Rob. Thank you. But I do think we should put the fine, how much the fine will be if people do not respect the parking bylaw here. I think that would be more effective than saying if you're not local, please turn around. Local traffic only, no park access, $200 fine for violators and towed, ticketed and towed. I think that would be more, in my opinion, it would be less rude, more direct, and it will scare people away more.
Okay, so we're gonna move to some resident feedback. I'll remind everybody it's a Metro Vancouver sign, and also we can't write an essay on it because they drive too fast to read that many screens. Ben Shulistani.
Thank you, Mayor Berenki. Can you hear me fine?
I can hear you fine.
Thank you so much. I wanted to make a comment about this parking permits. I think it should be consistent across Belcara. For instance, on Marine Avenue, which I can speak to, we have a location, and I think Rob Beck can talk about this. The front of Rob Beck's property has a permanent sign that says residents only parking, whereas other parts of Marine Avenue where there is no public access. For instance, at the end of Marine Avenue, where Rob's property is, actually has a public access to the beach. But everywhere else, for example, specifically between Kelly Road and Young Road, there is no public place. There's no public access to anything. And what the situation with before, I mean, which actually is right now maybe even more, is that if we leave that permit only, I mean, even residents only is problematic, let alone permit only, because that basically is very disrespectful to the Marine Avenue residents. So basically residents of the block. And everywhere you look, you go outside Belcara, every other municipality in British Columbia, everywhere you look, you see there's a parking permit that says residents of the block only, meaning, for example, if you apply that rule to our village on Marine Avenue, for example, it would be residents of Marine Avenue only. Otherwise, I mean, this would be more appropriate sign. I know that the village, but especially it would be consistent, at least with what a permanent sign that Rob Beck has put in front of his property.
Right there, you went over the line, Ben, and you know you went over the line, okay? So your point is taken. Your point is taken, and Rob Beck had nothing to do with the sign going in front of his property. That's staff done, and staff are putting permit-only signs or resident-only signs everywhere in the village. There is no public parking in the village until October 31st. And they've already communicated, not all the signs have come back in. And so about half the village is complete. And when it is fully complete, if you see any discrepancies, then we can bring it up then. But that's why you see.
There is already a discrepancy.
I just explained why there are discrepancies.
Would you please explain the reason why?
Then we're going to move on. I've explained the discrepancy, Ben. I'm sorry, we're moving on. We've got a long line of people.
I did not hear the reason why there is a permit.
Ben, you didn't listen to my answer then. I'm not going to keep asking you to stay in line. Okay? Joe Pelliccia, please go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little new here. I'm just curious as to what the repercussions are and how residents can either report or call in the parking situations that are in contravention. I would agree that yes, there's been a decrease, but my family's frustration with coming into Belcarra, seeing the illegal parking, and wondering how to deal with that. Not to mention, sorry, second piece is the no parking on pavement. So, 4x4 trucks and whatnot are just half in the ditch, parking all along up Bedwell Bay towards Main Avenue.
Okay, so welcome, good comments. So the first is that, I got lost, I got focused on the second one. The first one was what? Help me here. What was the first one? Or shall I just jump to the second?
How does he report? How does he report? Sorry.
Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, the first one was how do the residents contribute into reporting and dealing with this? I'm used to, Port Moody just calling the line and getting this.
Yeah, sorry, Joe. I appreciate your patience as I try to remember all these things. First is the website has both the number for the bylaw officer, and you can text her directly when she's working. You can also call staff at the hall on the off chance it's the bylaw officer's day off, because we have multiple people who can write tickets. You can call the non-emergency line for the RCMP. I believe that's on the website as well. And you can also call Coquitlam Towing, and they'll ask you to give the license plate and type of vehicle, and they will come out and they will tow it as well. And don't think you're going to be the first person to do that, because it's happening all the time. Residents as a patrol are one of the most effective, especially after-hour mechanisms for us to control the parking. The second piece about the no parking on pavement, that's just a function of us not having finished the swap on all the signs. Lorna, we've talked about this before. We're not going to have any of the no parking on pavement. It's going to go strictly to permit only parking, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So that will change, Joe. Your point's dead on. That having the 4x4s decide they're going to use some off-road canted parking is not appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Don Babineau.
I suppose the signs in what we're trying to accomplish is a necessary evil, but it does make me think about the 1971 song by the Five-Man Electrical Band, Signs, Signs, Everywhere a Sign. And we have so many damn signs in the village now. It's I think we've gone overboard. There was a sign put up just down from our property, and we're all very close to the road along our stretch, and there's a sign there now. And I've never seen anybody park there but residents, because it's residents parking. It's their parking lots. It's their driveways. I just think in our effort to try and control this, and I understand the reasons we want to do that, but can we? It's just in some cases, using that as an example, it's just, in my opinion, it's gone overboard. If it's gone overboard there, it's probably gone overboard in a couple other places.
It's a good point. I will offer though that I think I know where you're talking about, and we write an awful lot of tickets there, and we've had a bunch of complaints from your neighbors about those spots being taken up by non-residents. And so the signs there being permit only are to protect, with residents' complaints, to protect the residents who also live beside you, because people are willing to walk that distance. People were willing to walk that distance to the park before.
Yeah, it's on our side, the resident side of the road. The sign is there, so it just seemed odd to me.
I think I'm talking the same place, believe it or not.
Okay.
Really, it has been a huge issue for your neighbors.
Okay. Is it too late to ask a question? I appreciate the report and the update and all the major initiatives. And one of the ones you talked about, the fire engineer report, is it too late to ask a question about that?
No, that's when I brought it up. It's okay to ask now, or you can ask in other business at the end of the meeting, whatever you like.
It's just a quickie. When we had the fire engineer, I think he made his report to council 4 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken. I put him on the spot and said, well, how long is it going to take you to get this, the next step? And he said 6 weeks, which means that 2 weeks from now, he would be on track to giving us his report. Do we have any idea whether he's on track with his timing or not? And is anybody following up on the same?
I know he's working on it. Lorna, can you offer any additional perspective?
No, he is working on it, and I can follow up with him, but he's usually pretty good at meeting his deadlines. But I will do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Rob.
Yeah, just a couple of points of clarification. First of all, I don't have any signs in front of my property. We actually have a turnaround and a path. So just to clarify that point, the signs that are resident only parking are actually in front of my neighbors, and they used to extend for 3 or 4 properties. However, they were moved. Now they're only in front of my neighbor's property. Just as a point of clarity, out there, we can park 12 to 14 cars on our own property. Thanks so much.
Carolina.
Thank you. So to John's point, I understand, I feel the pain. I don't like seeing a whole bunch of signs either. First, when we started talking about resident-only parking versus, closing just some spots, there was a big conversation on whether we could do with 1 sign or 2 signs. Well, I did a lot of research on it, staff too, and the thing is, it's really hard to enforce it if you don't have the signage done every 40 meters. So unfortunately, I hear you, but that's the high price to pay. To do the resident only, we would have to blanket the whole municipality with signs, just as Enmore did, and like Lions Bay did. So, and the other question, it's for Neil, to change the subject a bit. There was one meeting that you said that I read on one of TransLink's updates a few weeks ago that they were pulling the MRN, they were deferring the MRN for all municipalities. The council meeting that we had right after that, Rob Begg asked you if that was the case, because obviously it's a big concern for us to lose our MRN. You said at that meeting that it wasn't, that it was a mistake from TransLink and that they have to update the news. Now I'm confused. Is that the case? Did we lose the MRN? And if so, if we didn't lose, like you said, the previous meeting, are we still at 75%?
So, Lorna, how many emails went back and forth with TransLink trying to clarify their statements? There must have been, and in fact, the person who gave us the info actually backtracked on her own emails.
Oh.
So when I gave the last update, the MRN was not affected. The MRN-R was affected. And then our financial contractor said, no, we won't be receiving the MRN. And they said, no, you will. And went back again and said, no, the MRN-R is the same as the MRN functionally as we think of it, and we won't be receiving it. So it is in fact delayed. And Ken was right about it all along. Kudos to Ken. And we will not be receiving it. And I don't know what you mean by 70%, 75%.
Oh, the funding model, like 75, 25, 50, 50.
It's
that
not,
the small municipalities were able to negotiate.
I don't believe the break is like that. It's a dollar figure based on kilometers of MRN road. It's not a split. What you might be thinking of is when there's a TransLink grant. That the Belcarre is now only responsible for 25%, but it's got nothing to do with the MRN. Thank
you, Neil. Yeah, sorry, I did make that confused. So we did lose it.
We didn't lose the grant funding, but every municipality has lost the MRN. Now, the provincial government has rescued TransLink, but not backfilled the TransLink deficit, and so TransLink has not committed yet to pay the MRN as they would normally do. Because they don't have their losses zeroed out yet.
Okay, thank you.
Joe Pelliccia, if I hopefully pronounce your name right.
Pelliccia. Close enough. Not the first time. I just want to refer back to the comments made regarding residential Belcarra people coming in and only having assigned parking for particular blocks. I just want to comment that I hope that's not in our thought process as a village. I strongly believe that we should be able to access our own village and park anywhere. Is there any thought process as to going down that route? And the other question that's going back and forth or debate, if you will, is the amount of signs. I feel with Carolina that you do need to prove diligence in order to issue tickets and tow and all that, but the abundance of signs is insane. Is there any avenue to post something at the beginning of the village in large print that just notifies, almost like coming into a gated community?
So your first thing, we never as a council ever talked before about restricting areas of Belcarra to residents. So no, it's never been considered. I can't imagine that it would be a popular thought, because the whole idea with this parking is to protect resident parking everywhere in Belcarra. So residents have always got access to all the beautiful land and sea that we have around us. So I don't see that as something you're going to see is going to get much traction, and obviously it hasn't tonight thus far. The number of signs and the idea of having a massive sign at the front of the village, that has been the way that Lions Bay has gone. They've got massive signs at the entry into Lions Bay. I think it's up for debate as to whether or not it's enforceable after you pass the sign without all the signage downstream. And so I think what you're seeing is a degree of standardization, like you would see in most municipalities, even less so than you'd see in, for example, Kitsilano, where there's signs, 3 signs on a block for the permit holders or the residents. But staff, what we try to do is provide direction to staff and have staff be responsible for all the actual implementation. So kudos to staff thus far responding to what has been a couple of different directions and a bunch of different things. And they're just doing their best. I can tell you they're working their butts off, and we'll have a chance to have the pendulum swing back and we'll continue to reassess.
And
Thank you.
I would just add to your worship that when a car is ticketed and pictures are taken, there's one picture taken that shows the sign. And so when we call the person and, when they want to dispute their ticket, we can say, I have a picture of your vehicle, the sign is visible, indicating whatever, but that you can't park there. And so it helps with our adjudication process.
Thank you. All right, Ben Shulistani.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Thank you, my Blanky. I completely agree with Joe and others that the village, especially where we have public access, for example, to the beach or to the park or many other beauties and facilities that we have in the village, that we should keep that open to everybody in Belcarra, not just a particular group. But I am against basically allowing the entire, for example, imagine what would happen if the entire village, the 600 residents or so, and their relatives, friends, guests, as for example, Councillor Wilder was talking about. Imagine what would happen if 600 residents would come and wanted to park on Marine Avenue between Kelly Road and Young Road, and whether there would be any space left for where there is no public access. There is nothing public between Kelly and Young Road. What would happen if 600 residents would come and park their vehicles on?
I think I got your point, and the answer is there wouldn't be enough parking. We'd be out of parking. So 635 of your 650 would not be able to park.
Yes, but that's not the only issue. What happens to the right of the residents on Marine Avenue who want to park there? When there is no.
The residents have parking that is not only allotted to them, that the owners of the residents, and they have guest parking passes for every house as required. And if the parking on the street is taken by other permit holders, then the residents are unfortunately going to be having a challenge finding parking. Hopefully residents will be able to park in their own, on their own driveway, as is a luxury that we are fortunate to have in Belcarra.
So should the residents of Marine Avenue go to a couple of streets up and park in Main Avenue, like up the hill, like, and then walk maybe for an hour to get to the residence?
If required, because 650 people decided to park, yes, unfortunately, that is what's going to have to happen if they can't park on their own driveway.
So I think this would be unfair. I would completely agree with everybody.
I understand that you think it's unfair. This isn't a big debate. This is something that we're getting a Q&A, and I'm going to move on to the next question. Peter Boker. I always pronounce your name incorrectly, Peter. Bokout. Please correct me if you can, and you're muted.
Oh, I'm back here.
There you go. We got you.
What is this Black Cat radar box that the RCMP put up on the pole?
The Black Cat is a device that measures traffic volume and speed, and I think it retains the data for something like a week. When they did the Black Cat program before in Belcarra, they put one of the boxes up, and they wanted to see what the speed and the volume was like, and then they began their traffic calming measures. And they kept the box up to see if the speeds slowed. And they put it up in several different areas in the village to be able to see if there was any positive effect to the speed calming measures. So the one they put up most recently, they didn't tell us they were going to do, and apparently it's already been stolen.
Yeah, I saw it was gone.
Yeah.
Now, do we pay for that service, or is that they're just they're doing?
Well, we pay for the RCMP, but it's their program. We don't pay extra for it, no.
Okay. So it's almost like that cop without the head on, that the board.
Yeah, but a little bit less personal.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Peter or Deborah Struck?
Hi there. Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
Good. Maybe just because people were asking about parking, and there's a number of people here that haven't been here all along, is either yourself or Lorna or Bruce maybe explain to people about Block 48, exactly how much property that was and what Belcarra gave up in exchange for getting park traffic off our roads.
Oh, you're putting the burden of archival review on people who aren't named Jim Chisholm. Do the best that I can in that Block 48 was a large, very valuable piece of land that was on the outskirts of Belcarra on the Sassamet Lakeside, that Belcarra's Council of the Day traded away to allow for Tumtawakton to be built in as a direct access point to Belcarra Park. And it was intended to reduce the traffic of visitors and tourists to Belcarra to access the amenities, and it would keep the traffic within Belcarra's municipality slower, safer, and less parking and obstruction. So it was a massive, extremely valuable piece of land, I think, is part of what you're alluding to, Deborah, and that we sacrificed in order to try to gain that calmed traffic, Bedwell Bay, Indianapolis 500 type of stretch.
Right. And so we shouldn't have to be fighting about trying to get traffic off our road, because that was part of the deal with Metro Van to do with building that road and getting that property is. And then also historically, there was an article that I had forwarded to a few of you that was written back in, I don't even know, was it the 60s or the 70s? And even then they said any and all park traffic should not come into the village. So yeah, just a bit of history.
From the 1900s, and what was especially interesting in that article that you sent was that Council of the Day had voted to not allow any non-resident traffic, and they wanted to gate Belcarra, and Metro Vancouver shot it down, saying that there was because Tumtawakton wasn't in existence and people couldn't access the park without going through Belcarra.
Yep,
that's right. So
no, it's a good point, and I think what you're seeing is there has been a shift to protecting Belcarra's roads, whether related to Block 48's trade or not, but it's hard to deal with the traffic and the stunting and the noise and the parking and the danger that comes with it. And so I think people are more and more trying to help find that happy medium, and the feedback's very appreciated.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to, because I know some people are trying to say, oh, this council and how awful they are and whatever, but historically getting the park traffic off our road was something that has always been tried to be a goal.
You're absolutely right. This council has not voted in favor of a gate at the entry to Belcarra, which another council did. So see how tolerant we are? That's how friendly we are. Carolina.
Yes, about Block 48, I've been looking for documentation about that for a long time, and I haven't found anything. Have you seen any documentation, Neil, on it?
No, just a summary of a legal doc, but it didn't have anything to do with an exchange. It just was a transfer doc. It didn't really provide any info.
Yeah, I would like to know the fine print. Would you mind sending a copy to council so we can learn some more about it?
I will find it. You know what, Deb, if you've got it handy in front of you, if you wouldn't mind sending it to the rest of council, and if you don't, then I'll try and find it. But
if it's the same one she sent, I have it. But
that's
it doesn't refer to Block 48. Oh, okay, okay, thank you. Yeah, Deborah, I've been looking for that documentation for a long time. I will refer to Lorna because I did talk to her a long time ago about that. So Lorna, if you could speak to it, if you can, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if, sorry to interrupt you, Deborah, if we could move on to point 7, number 7, the bylaws, and then get into public question period.
All right, why don't we, we'll finish the last 2 and we won't take any more comments after this. Don Babineau. You're muted. You're still muted. Oh, there you go. You're good. You're good.
I'm good. All right. I appreciate Deborah bringing up the point that she did. Kind of brings us back in the history as to why we did certain things. And I think for the years that followed, the new road getting put into the park helped. And you know, since we've been back in March, it's just been, it's constant, the traffic, in spite of our best efforts and the amount of signs that we've got to try to control it. It hasn't slowed the traffic down, certainly not in our area. I'm just wondering, should we revisit and could we revisit becoming a gated community? We don't have to have all the damn signs, and we achieve the objective, because what we're doing right now does not appear to be working. We just get people circling around in the village.
That's a very loaded question, and we will defer that for conversation at another time. John Shulistani, please, you can keep it brief so we can move on.
Thank you. I believe, am I only the person who's receiving such comments again?
I think you're the only one I've had to ask not to repeat yourself.
Thank you. This is my second question in the whole meeting today.
I mix up. You have so many people calling from your house. I apologize if I've looped you in with one of your other siblings or parents.
So, sure, no problem. My question is, I have the same question that Don raised and also Deborah raised. Is it possible to provide a brief history of why having non-residents of a block to access a road that is that does not have any public place? And the second question is that can we review Marine Avenue to remove non-residents and to access the block between Kelly Road and Young Road?
So there is no non-resident parking anymore. So I'm sure you'll be happy to hear that. And the permit-only parking, non-residents can't get them. They can be lent a resident guest permit, but that is it. So you'll be happy to hear there is no more non-resident parking on Marine.
No, what I meant was that can we change it to block only?
That has not gathered much momentum, and that we can continue that conversation another time. But it's been spoken against already, which is a good indication from other residents about the attractiveness of that proposal. All right, so we're going to move to 7.1. The bylaw enforcement notice 520 in 2018 Amendment to bylaw 565, 2020 for adoption to increase parking fines in the village. Can I get someone to move the item?
Moved.
Moved by Bruce,
Second.
seconded by Carolina. Thank you. Any discussion? None. All in favor? Oh, so I can ask. There's nothing up from residents. This is just the final approval of the new parking fines. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Motion carried. Thank you. For correspondence, there are 5 pieces of correspondence. Can I get someone to move receipt?
Moved.
Bruce received and Carolina seconded. Thank you. Any discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead, Bruce. I'm assuming we'll pretend you put your hand up. Go ahead.
I did, but maybe it was off screen. Yeah, first I wanted to say thank you and staff for the speedy letter to the province with respect to the issue of an exception on sprinklers. And but then I wanted to speak to 8.3, the report from the Water Committee.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's item 8.3 for those that are following. And I'd like to start by thanking all the members of the Water Committee. This is work that's been done without any public meeting because of the restrictions we're facing with COVID. And with Lorna's help, shortly we will soon be able to do public meetings with his group. So I just wanted to go through the items that were raised by the chair. And I think Ian may well be on the call. So if there's follow-up questions, they could come to him. But much of this has to do with the ongoing concern about the adequacy of our water supply. And individuals who have questions or have suggestions, I would urge them to send them to Ian's attention in behalf of the committee, Ian Devlin. If you don't happen to have his email address, feel free to send them to me and I will pass them on. So the first point he raises is the question of fire flow criteria for the village. My personal view on this one is that that will come out of the review process we're going through, as well as the assessments that are taking place. Because as he summarizes in here, as Ian does, these fire flow issues are set by the council, and they are based typically upon a risk assessment criteria. So if you have unlimited amounts of money, you would take the position the fire chief does, that more water is better, and we would have as much as possible. On the other hand, if you're doing trade-offs against costs and alternatives, you may decide on something other than that. And I think that will ultimately depend on information we have as to the options we have and the cost of those options that we have. There is on page 2, it's noted that there is additional information that the Water Committee will be able to provide with respect based on SCADA data as to our capabilities now, and we'll be able to provide that. And I think it's something that's desirable, and certainly I think it's something they're going to do in any event. There is a direction on the next bullet on page 2, which has to do with responding and seeking additional information from the District of North Vancouver. As Ian summarizes here, we had a letter in March of 2019 from the District of North Vancouver that simply said their system was probably capable of providing a greater flow than what we are receiving now, which is 21 liters per second. In theory. In reality, I think it's fairly consistent at about 19. But they make a comment that they could probably provide 30 or 60, but say there would be costs associated at our end. And they cite that as $2 to $3 million, which of course is quite significant. But we haven't explored that, and we don't know whether there's a trade-off against the speed of flow and the cost associated. So I'd like to suggest that we should ask staff to engage with the District of North Vancouver, and that may well be through our engineer, to get greater clarity on what that option is for us.
That's already happening, Bruce, just so you know.
Okay, so we've got, oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. So is Chris going to be dealing with them then?
Lorna, I'm assuming Chris is the one who's dealing with the District of North Vancouver. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Then there's comments with respect to other mitigation strategies, including issues of setbacks for greenery, the option of sprinkler systems, and they just commented on the fact, as those that have not been following council meetings will know, we are appealing a decision by the province not to allow us to require sprinklers in new homes and for major renovations. But that is very clearly one of the most effective ways of preventing small fires from ever becoming life-threatening or indeed doing massive damage to homes. While I'm on that topic, I'd like to note that Doug Brain had provided us with a video from the Sechelt Fire Department, which is a very sobering, practical example of the impact of fire left for the usual response time from their local volunteer fire department, as opposed to a sprinklered section of a home. What they do in the video is they have a duplex, identical both sides. They start a fire similar on both sides, and they simply videoed the whole thing. If you've ever wondered if sprinklers are worthwhile, it's a very, very convincing piece of video work. And I believe we're going to be putting that up on our website. Lorna, is that correct?
That's correct. We haven't yet, but it will be shortly, Your Worship.
No, I appreciate it. We just got it to you, but I'd like to thank Doug for doing that. And it really reinforces the potential value that we could realize by requiring sprinklers. And I'll just note, as Lorna reported a meeting ago, that actually the vast majority of the new homes being built are in fact sprinklered, which is not an unusual situation when it comes to legislation catching up with reality. And so many people do recognize the value of that. And finally, the recommendation that Ian makes that I'd like to endorse is their offer to prepare an as-built, at least a draft of an as-built description of our water system. One of their findings on their first go around at this was that we do not have an as-built diagram or a system description. And well, I know some work is taking place on that. I think this is an offer of some volunteer assistance from a very talented group. And I think it's one we should take up from them. Now, having said that, Lorna, I don't know whether you already have staff working on a manual for the system. I would imagine this could supplement that.
Yes, Your Worship, staff are working on standard operating procedures. I've received the first draft, and there is more work to be done on it, but it is being completed.
Okay, so again, I'd like to recommend in this case that we do endorse the committee doing work as we're in this COVID situation, and their opportunity for public meetings has been limited, to do some initial work in preparing a draft as-built description of our water system.
All right, thanks, Bruce.
And Ian may, I'm sorry, Ian may want to make a comment. I don't know, but obviously he's free to put his hand up.
Yeah. Okay, in the absence of that, Carolina, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. I'm not going to be repetitive, but I do agree with points you made. To me, it's important before we decide on a flow for us to see the dollar figure that comes with it. I'm happy to hear that Chris is going to be in contact with District of North Vancouver, so I'm really happy to hear that. That's something that I spoke about during a meeting in January, that I would like to see more information on that end. So I'm happy we're going to get that. As far as mitigation goes, I agree about, thank you to the mayor for writing the letter to the province. And any mitigation, I would say, I would like to take a look more into the CAF systems. I've been doing a lot of research on that myself. I understand that the fire chief has two concerns about that, which is maintenance and price. But so I would like more people, I would like for us to look, for the committee to look more into that. From the research I've done, it's not that pricey, but I'm not a professional. I know what I researched, and I, obviously I'll be talking more about it once the committee starts. And
I'm sorry, Councillor Clark, could I just interrupt you for a minute? I couldn't hear you. You want to look into what system?
A CAF system, so compressed air foam system. CAF, C-A-F.
It's the one that Chief Sharp discussed earlier, Lorna?
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, it's CAF. So I understand we have the foam, the air foam system, but I'm talking about CAF system, which is a compressed water, it's a compressed foam system, and your water, from my understanding and all the research I've done, goes, it goes 4 times as far, because it's a compressed system that you fight fire with foam. So I would like the committee to look more into that, bigger tenders, marine pumps like Kim Alfred suggested, any mitigation system, any mitigation systems that we have available out there that it's realistic to our budget. I would say I would like to look into it. I will say that in order to make a decision like that, I would like to have all of the information. So I would be considering as well looking at connecting at Crystal Creek. Maybe in the end we'll find that it's worth it going that route, even though right now we think it's the most expensive one. And to finalize my comments, I will support, I will endorse the committee to start taking a look of the water system as it is right now. I totally agree with that. So whatever more data we can collect, have a full conversation and have all of the information on the table before spending big bucks, I would agree to it, especially if it's for free. We're very lucky to have such a talented group of volunteers. It's like I said before, 2 engineers and 1 person that is a scientist, and it's part of the fire department as well. And Jim Chisholm with all of his knowledge as well. So I would appreciate, thank you very much. Those are my comments to that. And if I could speak about Suzanne's letter, may I?
Can we move on? Caroline, it's hard to hear you in the first place. So if you can just give us a break, having to try to listen to your muffled response, and we'll come back to you. Thanks. I will note, though, let's not ask the Water Committee to put a ton of work into something the fire department has been expressly clear that they do not think is appropriate technology. And that comes from a captain from Burnaby who's retired after decades of service with experience with CAF, and also Chief Sharp saying they've reviewed it and they don't like it. So we should probably just try to manage the workload we put on the Water Committee.
Yeah, but to that comment, Neil, what he said is that it was a concern about the maintenance and a concern about the price. So that's what he said at the last meeting. So.
Yeah, it's much bigger than that. And if the maintenance and the costs, if it worked, they would be doing it. So anyhow, that's I just leave it as a takeaway. Let's not give the Water Committee a staggering amount of work when they already got the fire department's position on it. Sure, you can bring it up again, but let's just manage the Water Committee's workload. Rob Day, go ahead.
Your Worship, could you just vote on receipt of the correspondence and then carry on the discussion about the correspondence?
All right, shall we move receipt? All in favor?
Second.
Oh yeah, it's moved and seconded. I just need a vote. Thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. There you go, Lorna.
Thank you. Okay.
Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I just want to make a couple comments on the sprinklers. We have sprinklers in our house, and it's not a very large investment. When you take a look at the overall value of your house, I think it was $12,000 to do our coach house garage and our main house. So a very appropriate spend, I believe, for the protection that you actually receive. I think we have to take a common sense approach to this. So the vast majority of the houses in Belcarra are not sprinkled, will not be sprinkled. So with that in mind, I don't think that we can look at sprinklers as a replacement for our water requirements for firefighting. And I think we have to explore the avenues that we're looking at to, in the future, and enable us to have the kind of firefighting we require or will require with newer types of homes in Belcarra. So I think we have to keep that in mind, that the vast majority are not going to be replaced tomorrow. I would say we're looking probably at 85 to 90% of the houses are not sprinkled and will not be sprinkled anytime soon. So something we need to consider. That's my own comments.
Thanks, Rob. Carolina, do you want to continue your comments?
Yes, to finalize, I'm getting close to my mic. Hopefully you can hear me better. To finalize, I would like to thank Suzanne Kyref from Fairco for her lovely letter. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Ben Shulistani.
Thank you, Mayor Berenki. I have two questions. One question that I just came up to me. Was there an urgency for Lorna to pass the motion for receipt before getting comments from everybody on the information item?
That's just parliamentary procedure, Your Worship, and we were getting a little bit off topic, so I just wanted to make the ease of moving forward.
In other words, I screwed up, Ben, and Lorna brought it back on track.
Yeah. To be on topic, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
To be on topic, our residents submitted an item for the information items, but it is excluded. It's not posted as one of the information items. So I wonder if Lorna intended to block my question of why our email correspondence was not included in the information items when others were.
Ben, I know you've received this answer.
Pardon me, sorry, I couldn't understand.
Ben, you've got it in writing.
We got in writing that it was not included in the information item, but I wonder why. Isn't it the right of every resident of Belcarra to submit email or correspondences to be included in the information item?
That is correct. And yet, if the resident is involved in an active litigation, any communications regarding the active litigation will not be published on the formal agenda, as it says in the written response to your question.
That's well, I disagree with that. The email correspondence had nothing to do with any active litigation or anything. It was a pure request from a resident, just like everybody else. I wonder what's the difference, how the village distinguishes between residents as to decide what to post in the information items, how they decide, how they make that decision as to who's.
Sure, Ben, I'll answer you. The answer is we use our lawyers, and our lawyers advised in that case not to put it onto the agenda.
Now, my next question, first I want to make an observation. As one of the information items, I see an email correspondence from our neighbor, the former Mayor Ralph Drew, who opposes the sale of road ends and the subdivision of properties below half an acre. I wanted to make an observation that during his mayorship, when he was in power, he subdivided his own property. So it's inappropriate for somebody who subdivided his own property below the norm, who has a property non-conforming, whose property is a quarter of an acre, to be able to be given an opportunity to oppose such a motion.
Noted. Thank you. All right. So, Lorna, we're on new business?
Yes, that's correct, Your Worship.
Miracle. Council, any new business from council to discuss? Not council. And so what we'll do is we'll move to public question period. And Don Babineau, you jumped the gun. Why don't you go ahead, please? Don, you're muted.
I'm sorry. There we go. I want to start with a couple of thank yous. My truck thanks you. The suspension of my truck thanks you. The road improvements at our end of the village is much appreciated. So I just wanted to say thank you for getting that done.
Thank you for the kind feedback.
I'd also like to thank you for including the major initiative update. I appreciate that. I think it's a good addition. Next, just in firefighting, there are some things. It's a long process. I understand. We're going through it. We're getting answers to a lot of questions, and that's good. One of the things we can do in our own backyards is control the fuels that can help a fire spread. Now that's something that would be outside of what the FUS would be doing, or what Chris, as our engineer, would be doing. Is that something that the village needs to take up as its own initiative to say, hey, that this is, be it tree density or be it just fuels in properties, that we have a system in place where we kind of control it. We're not talking about that.
The fire chief said he'd love to see Belcarra not have a single tree. FUS hasn't commented on it yet, but our water engineer said due to the trees and the density of the trees and the close proximity of the trees to the houses, I believe he used that in a calculation that indicated that our minimum water flow would need to be 225 liters per second at the extreme based on incorporating the trees. There's no question that they add additional risk, while of course adding additional beauty. It would be a council political decision about requiring tree trimming beyond the tree trimming bylaw, which is currently in process.
And like even the, beyond either removing trees or trimming trees, a lot of the properties I see that there's a lot of dead fuel in properties that would just get some dry weather and go up in a heartbeat. So that's even outside of what you just described.
It is. Private property is something that we, as you can imagine, it's more difficult to be intrusive, especially when across the street on Crown land, there might be 10 times the amount of fuels on that private property. It's a complicated piece. We've obviously, despite being broke, we still paid for the recent chipping to support it. And Lorna was going to come back with a second chipping date that can be paid for by residents to help encourage them with the ease of, getting rid of anything that gets pulled off their property. It is a concern. And council, we could start debating whether or not we want to force residents to remove any kind of fuel. It's certainly something that should be debated if there's enough interest.
Well, it just in terms of keeping costs down, you mentioned the 225 liters per second. If we were to do this, whatever this entails, perhaps then that requires 150 liters per second. So I'm just thinking that should be part of what we're looking at in terms of having a reduction in cost to put whatever system in that we deem necessary.
Point well taken.
That's that point. Next point I've got is there was people that put their name in the hat for the OCP committee. That was, I guess, months ago at this point. Is there going to be, because time has changed, is there going to be another opportunity for people to put their names in the hat before the election, or is the group that put their name in the first place, is that the group that stands?
We haven't worked that out. I don't know the answer to that. Lauren and I have only talked about it briefly. I don't think a decision's been made. The opening it up to more people doesn't hurt us, and yet the candidates that were confirmed prior to the last election may challenge that one, not wanting to have things change. I don't know. I don't know the answer. I would lean towards opening up the nomination process again, because people may be available now who weren't before.
Well, that's precisely right. With COVID and the ability for people to travel, my guess is that we may be sticking around home this year. And that could be true of a lot of other people as well, that put their name in their hat because they plan on traveling, but that may not be the case now.
That's a good point.
Next point I've got is Bruce in the last meeting made an effort to get the fire hall back in the budget. When I heard the discussion about that, and I thought it was reasonable at the time that it came out of the budget because most of the opposition to that was because they didn't know what the overall cost was going to be for the fire hall. So does it make sense that if work was done to answer that question, then my guess is the councillors that voted to take it off of the budget would then have the numbers that they were looking for, and then we can put it back into the budget. So does that make sense?
It's unfortunately counter governance, despite the fact that it makes sense. The people who voted the people who voted to get it out cannot bring it back. So only the people who voted against pushing it out, Rob and I, could bring it back.
Okay, but it seems to me the opposition was that there was an unknown there, a big unknown, which is going to be the cost of the fire hall. So if we were to be able to get more closely determine what that cost would be, then would it not make sense to bring it back so we can get it into our budget?
Bruce, I saw you shaking your head a bit. Do you want to comment?
Thanks, Neil. Yeah. Yeah, the issue there, and it has been a source of frustration, and I think a fair degree of understandable confusion. My own response on that and the need to remove it was simply a technicality, that it was a Sasamat Volunteer Fire Department expenditure. We didn't know the amount, but that wasn't critical. What was critical is that it would be something initiated, approved by the Sasamat Volunteer Fire Department, and that we would be billed through Metro Vancouver. So as far as I was concerned, it just technically didn't belong. What I was trying to do last meeting, and I know Neil brings the point here of, and I'm sure it's correct in terms of who may or may not revisit such a question. What I tried to do in the last one with a resolution that was so wordy, I think we almost finished Rob off as far as I can tell, was simply to say, look, we should anticipate expenditures. We may not know the amount, but they are significant. And the mere fact that they're not in our 5-year plan doesn't mean council can wave its hands and say, you know, there's no such possibility and we shouldn't be anticipating it and taking steps to be prepared to deal with it. That was the point. So it was really just a technicality as far as I'm concerned. Others may feel differently, I have no idea. But no, I still don't think it belongs in our 5-year plan, but I think a footnote certainly makes sense to recognize that. And I think all of council is well aware of it. It's true we don't have final numbers, and we may not for a while, but it's true it's also that it's going to be significant, and ultimately we're going to see it.
And that being the case, it seems that it needs to be there, and it probably needs to be with more than just a footnote as well. And it seems to me that I do recall what your concerns were at the time, Bruce. And
yeah.
But I think what the other concerns were that you know, is it a $4 million fire hall? Is it a $2.5 million fire hall?
Yeah.
And I just my guess is that if we could come in closer to what that number would be, that you get acceptance to putting that back as a budget item.
If I might. Through the chair. No, you wouldn't get agreement from me simply because it's not ours. It belongs to the Sasamat Volunteer Fire Department. I appreciate that just sounds like semantics, Don, but all that matters at the end of the day is, do you or do you not have the money when the time comes to either pay that or put it on a longer term bill? That's what matters. Whether it appears in our 5-year plan, well, maybe not. Maybe it appears in the Sasamat Volunteer Fire Department's multi-year plan. And that's something we're a 50% owner of.
My guess is there's going to be within 5 years that there's going to be a $2 million bill or a $2.5 million bill that's going to have to be paid by the village residents.
I agree with you.
Okay, and so
and I don't know what the number is, but I fully agree. I don't disagree with that.
Okay, so that being the case, are we not being negligent by not having that in a budgeting process?
If we get to the point where we have the bill and we don't have the money available, and we could have had the money available, and we didn't even think about it in not having the money available, I would agree with you. But I don't think those things will happen.
Oh, but
I think council's well aware of the fact that it's going to face a bill of some form at some stage. But I'm saying technically it doesn't belong in our 5-year plan. And that was the point that was made by Verna Barrett, I believe by Ralph, both in letters. And that convinced, well, at least 3 of us, because I think Rob and Neil felt otherwise, but at least 3 of us were convinced that it didn't belong in that plan. That doesn't mean you don't prepare for it.
Okay, so how do you prepare for it then? How do we start putting money aside, or at least planning for it?
But I would just note that there is nothing changed in terms of our projection, in terms of what money we were going to raise and when it was going to be raised. Nobody said take out road end sales because that got taken out. They're still there.
I
understand your question, but I just, to me, it's merely a technicality.
I can offer a little bit of perspective, also having talked to Verna Barrett about this.
Yeah.
And Verna's letter, she wrote before I talked to her. When she and I talked, she made a couple of important pieces. She recognizes that Belcair's ability to finance itself for the long-term future is going to be a constant challenge, not having developable land. She sees it as a massive concern. And and then when we started talking about the major expenses that we're going to have to be able to cover, she was, to Bruce's point, she was very opposed to the idea of having the fire hall in the budget, until I said it was just about creating a reserve fund that we could put money into. And she immediately said, oh, well, that's okay then. And that's what's happening is without being able to have this in our budget, we can't actually create a bucket that we can start putting money into that allows us to be able to offset the cost when the bill comes and hits home. And the concern that I have, and I think Bruce shares this concern, but we're looking at it a little bit differently. The concern I have is whether the bill's 2 million, 1 million, or 6 million, it's going to come due. And Belcarra right now has $1 million of room in debt capacity. We can't borrow enough to be able to build a hull. We can't borrow it. Never mind build any improvements into our water supply for firefighting infrastructure. We don't have the borrowing capacity because we are broke. Everything we have in our operating fund is we're paying interest on, it is borrowed. So we're like teenagers with maximum credit card debt, and we didn't just put aside a new bank account that's purely for savings that would help to offset in our planning down the road for the fire hall cost that's going to come in. And that's what Rob, I hope I'm speaking okay on your behalf. That's what Rob and I wanted, and that's what we weren't able to do. Staff are not able to create a reserve fund to start putting money aside because of that vote.
And it seems to me that it needs to be there because we know what's coming. And if it's not there, I think we're being negligent. And if it is there, then perhaps we'll be a little bit more motivated to do something about it. Be it if it's a water reservoir that's going to cost X millions of dollars, or whether the fire hall, which is going to cost at least X millions of dollars, let's get it out there. Let's recognize it, and let's actively and again, I said in the previous meeting, let's light a fire underneath ourselves to get the funds that we need to cover these capital expenditures that are coming.
And Don, your point's well taken. It was a vote that was completed, and so this is after the fact. We hear you on the sentiment, when there is more numbers or there's more willingness from Bruce, Carolina, or Lisa to reconsider, Rob and I can bring that back with a new notice to try to create that reserve fund and allow us to start saving again. But the appetite's not there for Rob and I think to bring it back. It recently just got defeated.
Okay, I understand. My request of you and Rob then is to more accurately determine what the cost of a new fire hall would be and then bring it back to the council.
Don, just to chime in here, quite frankly, I have no appetite to get involved in this conversation with the fire hall. What I would suggest we do is we seriously look at it in next year's budget at this point in time. And it'll either get voted down again to create a reserve. Technicalities or no technicalities, common sense says that we have to do something. And I agree with you wholeheartedly, but quite frankly, we flogged it to death. And, we can continue doing it. I would rather just put it aside and say, okay, we've got a budget coming up next year, and we put it in the budget at that time. Hopefully the other councillors will come around, I guess, to you, the point that Mayor Blinky and myself already realized. If not, it'll get voted down again. But at this point in time, I mean, you got to also remember that we don't have any money put away for any kind of a road washout, any kind of a serious problem at all. So, I mean, that's where we were coming from. But, honestly, from my own point of view, I really don't want to flog this thing anymore. I don't want to do any more explanation on it. I think if we put it off until next year's budget at that point in time, and there could be a lot of discussion by villagers as to what is the importance. And at that point in time, relay to the other councillors how important it is. It works on numbers. Talk to 50 people, get them to write a letter saying it's important. But, there's only 2 of us. And that saw the importance and saw the necessity to get going on this thing at this point in time. And that's where we're at this point. So I think we've got other issues as well. You've got to remember, once we get involved in this, again, we've got staff input, and they're working on an awful lot at this point in time. So I would prefer to approach it that way. We've got 6 months to put it in, to find out, to get a more accurate cost on the project, and we go forward from in there. I hate to say that, but.
Thanks, Rob. No worries. Bruce, you've had your hand up for a while, and I'm assuming you'd like to be able to respond to some of this as well.
Yeah, I would. Thank you. Just to say, yeah, I agree with Rob. I'm quite frankly quite tired of the topic, as I'm sure Rob is, and in all likelihood others are as well. I just would want to reiterate the point. There is nothing in that decision that prevents us from taking the steps that will ensure the dollars are there. It's no harder and it's no easier as a result of that decision. Everybody is conscious of the fact that there's a bill coming. I'm as conscious as anyone else is. And whether it is or isn't in that particular document called our 5-year financial plan, in my mind, doesn't prevent council from taking the necessary steps. And let's face it, I mean, the steps really come down primarily to road allowances, which, I mean, I wasn't part of your discussion tonight, so I don't know where we are on that, but that was one of the drivers of the importance of our having some reserves set aside. Anyway, I'll stop there and hope we don't have to ever talk about it again. But I agree with Rob. We can get to it with next year, by which time it'll have had no impact on our practical capabilities.
All right, Bruce, you had your hand up anyways. Did you want to talk about something else in response to Don, or is that just related?
No, that's fine. I'm finished. More than enough. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Don, have you got anything else?
I guess just my final comment on that is that Bruce make a comment that there's nothing stopping us from having it recorded somewhere. I mean, it would seem logical to me that it would be in the budget, but it's not. And to my knowledge, it's not anywhere other than what you attempted to bring up in the last council meeting, which didn't go anywhere. So right now it's not recorded anywhere, and we know a train is coming down the track, and we got our heads in the sand, and we're not doing anything about it.
My point is our heads aren't in the sand, Don, and if there's nobody on council who isn't aware that there's a substantial bill that's going to arrive. I'm just telling you, whether it is, again, in my mind, it's a pure technicality. If we wanted to cite it as an anticipated expense from the Sasamat Volunteer Fire Department, we could. But I don't think it matters. It's not, I mean, when we're making decisions that have to do whether we do or do not build reserves up, it's going to be there in the minds of everyone who's on this call, and certainly all the councillors. They're well aware of it. And I appreciate your concern, and I appreciate your contributions to the fire department. Thank God there's volunteers like you about.
Okay. Neil,
we're really long, Don, in your allocated time.
Okay.
Are you okay?
I'll save it for the next meeting.
All right, thanks. Carolina, you have your hand up?
Yes. Yes, just to Don's point, the fire hall was never in the budget. It was on the financial plan for 2022. So just that small correction. And I think we should move along because it's been 17 minutes now.
We were already along. All right, David Goodman.
Thank you.
Dave Goodman.
Yep.
Here we go. We hear you. Go ahead.
Brief comment, and then a more substantive issue. With respect to Don's third point, I asked you exactly the same question, I think 2 meetings ago, and you did provide an answer at that time. And the answer was that you're going to be revisiting the whole issue of the OCP and starting over, essentially. And best check the record on that. I might not have had your wording exactly, but that was what I perceived you to have said in response to my question. The second issue, this is a much more substantive issue, and I hope we'll get a little bit of a discussion on it. And it's that 2 of the 4 councillors, so half of our elected representatives, have decided to recuse themselves from any discussion of land disposition because of what they perceive as a conflict of interest. And I think I would ask that they reconsider that, such that it's not a global recusing, but rather a specific recusal on specific issues that affect them personally, and And the reason I bring that up is that there was a discussion when they were out of the room on some very substantive issues that are going to affect our community for a long time. For instance, there was a discussion on the use of funds from the disposition of seashore road ends. In fact, there was a proposal that it be used for something that was never ever discussed before. I think those two councillors that were absent should have been there to discuss that. The other issue is the minimum subdivision requirements. You've just now passed or approved the recommendation that the staff look at a subdivision of less than 0.5 acres only for village-owned parcels. Yet one of the councillors had asked specifically, or have we discussed these three alternatives in the report? And the answer was affirmative. And then you went on to approve that in spite of my earlier cautions that you should be careful about approving those recommendations. So what I would ask is that those two councillors that have recused themselves reevaluate, and rather than doing what they consider to be the honorable thing, and some of us consider it perhaps an easy way out or an abdication of responsibility on major issues, that they reconsider and only recuse themselves when the discussion centers on a very specific issue that affects them immediately. Okay?
Point taken. Carolina, you had your hand up the second he started talking.
Thank you. To his first point, I remember I was under the same understanding as you, Dave, that we were going to open again the subscriptions for whoever wants to participate from the OCP. That's what I understood from 2 meetings ago from Neil's response to you. Your second point, like I explained, that's why I decided to make my statement again. My conflict is not so broad that it extends to how the funds are going to be used. So I'm sorry I missed part of that conversation. I guess that's part of it. But I am being advised by a lawyer every step of the way. So I have been I've been reaching out to my lawyer. I've done it more than once. So that is why I'm taking the actions that I am taking it. But as far as funds go and what are we going to do with the money, I have no conflict on that. So I will be speaking when time comes. I understand. I obviously read. I wasn't part of the meeting when you guys were talking about it, but I obviously read the report throughout. So and that's the decision I made. And yeah, all I can do is keep on talking to my lawyer and noted what you just said. Thank you.
And in defense of Carolina, hang on, sorry, Dave, just a second. In defense of Carolina and Bruce, you can't make your own interpretation of the charter. If there's a pecuniary interest, you're out. And I respect the fact that you'd like to see more people at the table, but the earlier conversations had an avalanche of feedback of concerns, contrary to yours. And so you're absolutely entitled to have the concern, but when it's a pecuniary interest, which is the defining criteria for a conflict, that's not something you get a chance to. You only have your integrity once. Sorry, Bruce, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Just wanted to say that one thing, and I appreciate how difficult it is to package these things, but one of the things I had a chance to consider again is I was waiting in the cloakroom. Was that if we could package this as we come forward with subsequent material so we can segment some of these, it might be possible to participate more fully. And I appreciate for Lorna, you've got a lot of things to worry about, but one of them is that if we can segment issues that deal with waterfront property, for example, from non-waterfront, I'd certainly be happy to segment my participation.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Your hand was up. Is this on something else, or would you like me to put your hand down?
No, you can put it down now. Thanks.
Okay, no worries. Carolina, your hand's still up?
sorry.
No, okay.
My bad, yeah.
No, don't worry. It might have been mine not putting it down. No worries. Ben Shulistani.
Can I follow up on comments first, though?
Okay, sorry. Okay, hang on, Ben. Dave, go ahead if you want to follow up.
So my concern now then is that they recuse themselves from the first interim report. If the next report is going to come forward with some more recommendations, and I think it's very important to segment it into specific issues, because like I said, they are now absenting themselves from very important discussions that affect the future of the community, and like the zoning for village only, and there's other examples in this report. So can we be assured that they'll be able to participate almost fully in the discussion of the next report that staff have been charged with coming up with?
There's no way for us to be able to guarantee in advance that the pecuniary interest component of the charter describing conflict of interest is going to be completely absolved from a massive topic at this point. The goal to have things parsed out so that they can contribute is perfect. And I think it's going to be much easier for them to contribute when it comes to anything after the selection of the road ends that are being sold. Once those road ends are sold, it's all about how do we, if, by the way, I don't want to get ahead of myself. If those road ends are selected to be sold, then there's no longer conflict about how to put the money forward, how to do anything else. It's just about the consideration in advance of the road ends that would have an interest for them financially. So they're going to be able to be involved far more once the decision making that can affect their properties is completed. And Dave, you were concerned about the thing that came up about the potential use of funds. It should have given you peace that the response that you got from Lisa and I and your concerns. And
it did. I think I commented on that, Neil.
My point is that we're not steamrolling things in a way that you won't agree with. We're trying to do this as responsibly as possible, and you're going to see alignment in I hope, rational thought throughout.
Thank you.
No worries. Your point's well taken. Ben Shulistani, your turn.
Thank you, Mayor Belenki. I have a question for the Chief Admin Officer as well as each councillor. So I would like a response from each. So from Laura as well as yourself, Mayor Belenki, and each of the councillors. And this is my question. Are you aware of any resident anywhere on Marine Avenue or in Belcara or in British Columbia or in Canada or anywhere around the world for that matter, other than the resident of lot 10, that's our property, who has a recreational dock on the foreshore of their property but does not have access to the dock themselves?
Okay, so Ben, I'm going to take this first because I'm aware of a bunch of them. I've been working directly with the port, and there are a bunch of these circumstances exactly how you have described in North Vancouver. So yes, I'll take that first, and whether or not you still want other councillors to respond, there are absolutely...
Would you please identify if you are aware of a dock that is front of someone's property, but that property does not have access to them? And this is a recreational dock, not a commercial.
It's the port's domain. I know from the port that this is a huge issue that they're trying to deal with, and it's the same for everybody, and you are not alone.
So to be clear, Mayor Belenki, the question is about recreational docks. So these are for property.
Yes. Yes.
So you are claiming that there is a dock, that you have seen a dock somewhere in British Columbia that is fronting a property.
Ben, I've answered your question. Would you like the other councillors to say, now that Neil told me, I'm aware of other similar docks, would you like them just to repeat what I said?
I would like also the address of that.
I was not given the address from the port. You can deal with the port directly. It's their domain.
So may I get an answer from?
Do you really want the rest of the councillors to repeat what I
Of
just
course,
said?
of course, because I have asked many places and nobody could identify one. This is news to me that you identified something, but you did not
I
disclose.
told you where to get the information is from the port.
I have, but the port said.
Really quickly, Rob, would you like to say if you're aware now of any other circumstances that are similar? Rob, you're muted.
I'm aware now that you've said that. Up till then, I wasn't. It wasn't interested at that point.
Thanks, Rob. Lisa, are you aware of any other circumstances as already outlined?
I'm not aware, but I don't want to speak to this because we're in litigation. I don't think we should be talking about this.
Carolina?
I'm gonna follow Lisa's lead on that one.
Bruce?
I don't think it's.
Yeah, I have no comment given that we're in litigation.
So actually so may I just make one comment? I believe this is completely inappropriate to be hiding behind a litigation against Ralph Drew, not the.
Sorry,
there's
Ben,
no litigation.
Ben, there's no more opportunities here. I will, Ben, I will
Oh, yeah.
expel you from the meeting if you keep this up. If you'd like to continue to listen, you're welcome to, but your point's been answered and the commentary is not welcome. Peter or Deborah Struck?
Hi, it's Peter.
Peter, go ahead, please.
Well, I'll try and squeeze my half hour of stuff into 3 minutes. So first item possibly for next council meeting is there's a bylaw number 40, which states that if anybody makes any kind of noise with any machine that disturbs anybody in any way, they're subject to up to $500 fine and 6 months in jail. This is bylaw number 40, made in 1981. So it might be an idea to decide to eliminate this bylaw or to fix it and make it something more practical than the reading of it. And once people do read this before the next council meeting, they'll find out how interesting it reads.
Would you like it to be punishable by death? Like, how do you want to amend it?
I would like to eliminate the bylaw or write one that is more reasonably written, one or the other.
Yeah, it's a great example of bylaws that have either no teeth or no value in their current context. I agree. Now, I think as soon as you started talking, Carolina had her hand up. Carolina, do you want to comment on this?
Thank you very much. Peter, I don't know if you recall that or Deborah recalls or anybody on council. That is something that I asked. I absolutely agree with you. There should be no bylaws written by us that sends people to jail for 6 months for simply making some noise. I did ask staff back then, we did have a conversation, but that was over a year ago. And I did ask for that bylaw to be written. We had some exchange of emails between council and Lorna. So I'm waiting for that as well. But I completely agree with you. I said that before I got elected. That was always something that bothered me. Brought that up on the first 2 months that after I was elected. And I would like to see that change too. Thank you.
Okay, I won't count that as part of my 3 minutes. So the next topic is going to be, I was surprised to hear that Dave Goodman was able to see the summary of the legal opinion, and I'd like to find out how I can and other residents can see this legal opinion that Dave Goodman was allowed to see.
Lorna, what's the process?
Just ask me, your worship, and I'll provide it.
Okay.
Okay, Peter, we want to write a letter to Lorna?
Just an email is good.
So, sorry, I should get an email.
Okay. And I didn't jump in quick enough to talk about the new policy that I think you approved that allows the council to contemplate releasing lawyers' opinions. So, Lisa said it's not in her nature to like doing that sort of thing. I've been more than 45 years of dealing with lawyers all the time, and it's not in my nature to not release it. So being in your nature or not, it's in my nature to have transparency and release it. And Carolina seems to have some fear of going against lawyers' opinions. If I went with my lawyers' opinions, I would be nowhere in life, because basically they're so scared to recommend anything that every good decision I've ever made was in contrary to their advice. So I actually am not a fan of lawyers' advice at all. They're pretty well chicken to, in most circumstances, to recommend anything and hide behind all kinds of excuses. So if we want to have an opinion on selling road ends, I wonder why we don't simply just write a letter and for no charge at all, write to Victoria and find out what they think about our ideas, rather than having to hire a consultant, to hire a lawyer, to ask them and then hide what was said from the public after all that is done. You know, I don't think we need to have a lawyer and a consultant in between to ask what the government thinks of our idea. So what other matters was there? That's all I can think of for the moment. So I hope I kept it within my 3 minutes so people can go home.
You're well within. Just so you know that there wasn't a consultant in the middle of that legal opinion. Dan's talked about lawyers getting involved going forward, but there wasn't a consultant in the middle of that one.
Oh,
and,
okay.
and you've got part of council agrees with the transparency goal, and other parts are trying to be very protective, and protecting the village is not a bad thing. It's just different ideas of what transparency, the value and the risks associated. Caroline, you got your hand up again.
Thank you. So yeah, to Peter's comment, yes, I agree with Neil. I think it's just two different points of views. I will add though, if I were to just ignore every lawyer's advice I get, I would probably be participating of the conversation about road ends today. And right, so there is that. So yeah, so to me, it's just, I'm just being cautious. And the reason why I feel that way too is because I've seen Lorna's summary and I've seen the actual opinion, and I think she does an excellent job summarizing the lawyer's opinion. So to me, there's a few times that I really don't see the need to release the actual opinion and give up the privilege of confidentiality between client and lawyer. Thank you.
All right, John Shulstani.
Thank you. Considering we are dealing with legal opinions, I appreciate a legal opinion can also be made why our letter to the council has been blocked and not put in the council agenda. That's the first thing. My second question is, considering we are reviewing the OCP, the OCP currently shows a dock in front of our property. I wonder if that error could be corrected, considering the council or the village is recognizing the dock in front of our property to as a dock of our neighbor, former Mayor Drew. I wonder if that error in the OCP could be corrected before the next council meeting, and the report and the consultants can review it, why there is a dock in front of our property, why the council made that decision, why and how we.
John, we can't talk about litigation that's ongoing. The OCP process is still being planned. It's not confirmed. The documents have not been finalized, and there'll be plenty of transparency as we talk about this every step of the way with the OCP amendment review. So I assume that our concern with respect to the dock showing in the OCP in front of our property will be dealt with before the next council meeting? I'm going to refer back to what I just said, John. The planning is underway right now, and it will be discussed with council and transparently in front of everybody over and over and over. This is not the time to have anything removed from any maps, period. And we shouldn't even be talking about this. As you've heard over and over and over in writing from lawyers and otherwise, this is not something for public conversation. Well, I haven't seen such opinion with respect to current dock applications. If there has been something wrongdoing with respect to the former mayor, I accept it. But something that's current council is denying a rightful access of the existing owner receiving a letter. We're not denying access. The process hasn't even finished being planned. So there is no application even possible. There's no denial possible. We're going to move on from this conversation. Okay, I'm going to have a second question. My next question is that the error in the OCP, is it has Port being involved in that in showing a dock in front of our property? I don't know if anybody can hear me. We can't talk about litigation. Am I on mute right now? We cannot talk about items that are under litigation, John. And I'm not sure how. I mean, all I can do is say, if you bring up anything up under litigation again, I'm going to have to expel you from the meeting. Sure. Maybe just a comment from your earlier statements, not from today, but before that. Let's move forward.
And even if we want to forget what has been done in the past, let's moving forward and the current council being transparent and want to move things forward. So right now the moratorium has been lifted and we are applying for a DOT, but the existing, the OCP is the issue which you are.
Sorry, John. I warned you. We are not going to discuss anything under current litigation. I don't see any other comments from anybody. Any other questions before we move to adjourn? All right, seeing nothing.
I move to adjourn.
Move to adjourn from Begg, seconded
Second.
by Wilder. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you to staff and everyone for all the hard work. Stay well, everybody. We will hopefully be meeting in person sometime in the future. Keep well.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.